Hey, Jennifer here from cherish365.com. Thank you so much for all the people who have subscribed to my channel, to my blog. For those of you who haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. There's also the bell so you can get notifications every time I post a new video. So something I'm going to be doing this year is posting more tutorials on how to use your camera, because I really want to help you get better at using your camera so you can get better at taking pictures, capturing memories that you're making with your family, because you're going to look back and want to cherish these things. Your kids, you, your own, like this is the youngest you're ever going to be again, today. So you want to be able to capture it. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to use your camera. So you have a nice fancy DSLR camera. Maybe you haven't been using it because you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Or maybe you have, but you've been using it in auto mode and you want to switch out of that, step your game up. Today I'm going to be walking you through some other modes on your camera that you can use if you're not ready to go to full manual, but maybe some steps in between that can help you out. I'm gonna explain what they are so you can start taking your photography to the next level. This isn't to dog on auto mode, okay? Because on a Canon, Scene Intelligent Auto is actually pretty good at guessing, trying to guess what you're shooting for and trying to get the best settings for the picture you're trying to take. But learning your settings and switching to manual can make a huge difference. There's like a dozen different modes you can use, and it can be intimidating if you're trying to switch from full auto to full manual. So I'm gonna explain 5 different modes in between. I'm using an EOS Rebel T7i. It's a great camera, it has Wi-Fi, it has, like I said, about a dozen different modes on there, but I'm gonna show you 5 that are super useful. So the first one I'm gonna tell you about is special scene mode. On the Canon EOS Rebel T7i, it's abbreviated SCN. It's similar to full auto, except in this mode, you can pick a specific scenario you're shooting in. Are you taking a group photo? Are you taking a picture of your child blowing out his birthday candles? Or maybe a night portrait or a picture of a delicious meal you just made? These special scene options automatically are gonna choose the best settings for your situation. So here's a tip, make sure that you're paying attention to what settings your camera's choosing for each of those different situations. Because when you're ready to switch to full manual mode, you can kind of use that as a guide to know where your settings should be. So the next mode I'm gonna tell you about, if you switch to the little face on your camera, is portrait mode for, you guessed it, taking portraits. Now in this mode, it makes your subject stand out against a shallow depth of field or like a blurred background. You know, people who are trying to take pictures a lot of times want their subject in focus and they just want everything else behind them out of focus. This mode's gonna help you do that. It also creates smoother skin tones and softer hair. So this is great for beginners if you think you're just gonna be shooting portraits. Now, if you think you're gonna be taking pictures of your kids, doing other things and shooting portraits and maybe going back and forth, then I recommend trying this next mode. All right, so check this out. When I was first starting to get the hang of photography, I loved shooting in this mode, AV mode. It means Aperture Priority. So when I wanted to step my photography game up a little bit, but I was still intimidated by full auto mode, this is the mode that I shot in the most. I took tons of baby pictures of my daughter in this mode, Aperture Priority. So let me explain how it works. In this mode, the camera allows you to set the aperture or the f-stop, and then it automatically takes care of the rest of the settings. So with the aperture, you can decide how much depth or blur you want in the background. Remember how we talked about how, you know, we want to get those nice portraits and just blur out everything behind us? Well, you can decide exactly how blurry you want that to be. So the smaller that number, the smaller your f-stop, the more blurry that background's gonna be. The bigger that number, the less blurry it's gonna be. All you have to do is decide how blurry you want that background to be and then set your number accordingly. Now, take note that the smaller the number is, the more light it's gonna let into your camera. So if you're indoors, you're probably gonna want that number to be pretty small if you don't have a lot of sunlight coming into the room. If you raise that number too high, your photos are gonna be a lot darker and probably underexposed, which means too dark. We'll get to that in a minute. The next mode we're gonna talk about is shutter priority mode, or it might be called TV on your camera. If you switch to that, what it's gonna do is let you decide how blurry you want your objects in motion to be. The cool thing about this camera is it kind of gives you a guide right on the back. So if you switch to this mode, you can see how it shows you what a higher shutter speed and a lower shutter speed is gonna look like. All right, so here's an example of different shutter speeds. Here's a waterfall. If you have a slower shutter speed, you're gonna see more of a smooth waterfall because you're capturing more of the motion of the waterfall. If you wanna freeze it in action, you can have a higher shutter speed number. The same goes if you're taking pictures of your kids. Let me explain. We love Disney World. My daughter loves the teacups. It's her favorite ride. So when we rode that, I wanted to make sure that I was capturing the full motion of the ride. So I made sure to lower my shutter speed, focus on my daughter, and snap a picture while we were moving. Since she and I were spinning at the exact same time, it was able to freeze her, but then the background was blurry because we were moving so fast. If your kids are riding a bike, for example, and you want to get a nice sharp image of them, then you can raise that shutter speed. When my kids are playing and I'm just trying to capture their laughter and make sure that I get a sharp image, I'm gonna have a higher shutter speed, like over 300. But if they're running around and being silly, like we're running around in the backyard and I want to capture the essence of their silly childhood that's just chaotic, then I might slow that shutter speed down a little bit so you can see that we're running around, we're having a good time, it's a little bit blurry, but it's all a part of that experience that you're capturing. So lower shutter speed, you're gonna get more background blur. Your kids are probably gonna be a little blurry. It's capturing them in motion. Higher shutter speed if you wanna actually freeze that action, not get a blurry picture, but get those sharp smiles. So all these things we've been talking about, aperture, shutter speed, ISO is another. All of these come together and determine your exposure, which basically means how bright your photo is. I personally like to have my photos ever so slightly overexposed. So that means they're a little bit brighter, a little bit lighter. That's just my style. So in this next mode I'm talking about, Program AE mode, you get to decide how bright you want your photos to be, and then the camera sets the rest for you. I'll usually set my exposure to be about +1/3 or +2/3. I like to take a test shot and see how bright it is and then adjust it if necessary. But the nice thing about this mode is if you're moving in and out of shadowy areas or the light keeps changing drastically, your camera settings are gonna automatically change and regulate for you so you still get the same look you want for each of your pictures. You're gonna press this button right here that has a little ± symbol on it. You're gonna hold that, and then you're gonna roll the shutter wheel to set your preferred exposure level. The great thing is once you master those last 3 modes I told you about, you're pretty much ready to switch to manual and take full control over all the settings on your camera so you can get the picture looking exactly the way you want it. So the way I like to do it is set my aperture first so I can decide, you know, if I want a blurry background or a more sharp background. After I decide that, how much depth I want and set that, then I'll set my ISO. So if we're outside, that number's usually gonna be a lot lower. It might be 100, 200, unless it's like getting dark outside, then it's pretty much gonna be around that because my aperture is usually wide open or it's like a low f-stop number. So that creates more blur, and remember, it lets more light in. And then lastly, I set the shutter speed, kind of taking note to where that meter is falling so I can get that exposure exactly the way I want it. So there you have it. That's basically my tips for getting you out of full auto mode. Hopefully one of those modes is gonna help you out. Let me know if you have any questions, just drop me a comment. Thanks so much for tuning in for this tutorial. Hopefully you found it helpful. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Drop me a comment if you have any questions, and subscribe to my channel because I'm gonna be doing a lot more of these throughout the year, helping you take better pictures of your family. See you in the next one.